Looking for a guaranteed way to create content that resonates with your audience? Start a podcast. Interview your ideal clients and let them choose the topic of the interview. Because if your ideal clients care about the topic, there's a good chance the rest of your audience will care about it too. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to B2B Growth. I'm Logan Lyles with Sweetfish Media. Today, I'm joined by Darcy Kurtz. She is the VP of Global Product Marketing over at Mailchimp. Darcy, how's it going today?
It's great. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Darcy, for folks who aren't familiar with you, and I'm sure pretty much everybody listening to this has at least heard of Mailchimp. If they haven't, maybe give them a little bit of context, but I would love to kick off the conversation today with a little bit about your marketing background as well as what you and the team at Mailchimp are up to these days.
Sure. So Mailchimp has been around for almost 20 years now and really been focused on how do we empower small businesses to do great marketing. And really founded as a world-class email is where we started. And over the last couple of years, we've evolved into a full all-in-one marketing platform to support all the needs of small businesses as they're trying to go to market.
Absolutely. And yourself, did I see that you have some sales and some sales training background before really going, all in for the rest of your career on the marketing side? And as we mentioned, you're now in product marketing at Mailchimp.
Yes, that's exactly right. I actually started in direct sales at Dell. I won't say how many years ago that was, but a beat or two back. I actually love the fact that I started in sales because sales and marketing are so intertwined. And to be on the front lines and be able to talk to customers every day, hear what their concerns are, understand how to take those concerns and translate that into a solution that we can provide to them. It really was a core foundation that led me into the marketing side. And I highly recommend it to people out there as a career path.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. As a salesperson who loves marketing, or technically now a marketer who also does sales, I kind of wear both hats for our team. And to me, I just love that because I love so many things about marketing. I love so many things about sales. And this concept of just broken sales and marketing alignment, is just so baffling, frustrating, and almost breaks my heart. Like, hey, we are here, as Sangram Vajre over at Terminus always says, it's this one team mentality. And I love to talk to people who have experience on, quote unquote, both sides of the fence, if you will, because I think it lends itself to a unique perspective. Speaking of unique perspectives, we're going to be talking today about some emerging trends, especially in marketing within the small business sector. As most folks know, as you mentioned, Darcy, Mailchimp serves the small business sector and has for quite some time. You guys had a few reports done here recently that are going to inform a good part of this conversation. Can you tell us a little bit about what those were, kind of the aim of them, as we get into the topic around some trends in small business marketing, as we're going to be talking about scaling your marketing, multi-channel, automation, and personalization? I don't think anything that surprises anyone, but for a little bit of context, tell us a little bit about these reports that you guys did recently.
Yeah, so we're in a very unique position with over 12 million customers globally that we're talking to all the time. We're able to kind of dig in and get a pretty broad view of what's going on in the small business market. And for a long time, we used it to help us with creating better tools and things like that for small business. And it kind of dawned on us, this is the kind of thing that small businesses might actually appreciate hearing about. And it might help inspire them and support them in their business goals. So this year we published 2 different reports. One was really around the small business creation journey, which we had been really digging into for a while. And I think the response we've had so far has been overwhelmingly positive, because people are like, oh my gosh, that's exactly how I feel. And that's exactly what I went through. So it definitely is helping with helping people understand they're not in this alone. Starting a business is hard, and there's a lot of key learnings there. And then the one for those businesses that are already kind of up and running and trying to market, the State of Small Business Marketing really talks about what are the things that are working, what are trends that small businesses should be looking to, that we're starting to see a lot of interest in, and just helping to support small businesses out there with more data to help them make better decisions.
Yeah, I love that. Just in a recent episode, I believe it was Greg Drobnik over at Heal. He's a co-founder. They're doing some interesting things in healthcare. One of the things he mentioned to me on the show was, a lot of companies are surprised by, or would be surprised if they took a closer look at the amount of data they have, but the amount of useful data to their target audience. So I love that you guys are keying in on that fact at Mailchimp. Let's talk about, that small business creation and that scaling portion of marketing that you just mentioned, Darcy. The entry point for entrepreneurship is a lot lower. The barrier's lower than it's ever been, especially in our country. But scaling your marketing and standing out in a crowded environment is really, really tough. So what are some of the trends that you guys point to, and some of the advice based on those trends that you are giving to small businesses when it comes to, okay, I've started, how do I start scaling? When do I start marketing? Where do I even begin?
Yeah, it's such an important question. And one of the things that we found is, it takes somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 months. So about 60%, well more than half of our respondents said it took over 6 months to go from I have an idea to actually taking action. And another 40% took even longer than that. They took a year. So it's one of those things where you've got a great idea, you want to do something. How do you get off the blocks? And what we've really been talking to people is just do it. Take a chance, start iterating your way in. The second you have an idea, you can start marketing. So think about, go get a domain, go do some searches and see, is the name that you want for your business, can you buy the domain for it? Can you get a social handle for it? And start securing those. You can do little things like if you do get a social handle, create some social posts that go to a landing page that has a form fill on it where you can start to collect names and addresses. So when you are ready to launch, you already have a database full of contacts that are potentially interested in your product or service. We also tell people do things like use email to do some testing to say, hey, here's a product idea I have. What do you think? You can do surveys. You can get feedback. A lot of people don't necessarily consider all of that marketing, but it is. And you don't have to wait until everything is, all your I's are dotted and T's are crossed and you're ready to launch to start your marketing, because you might as well start selling on day one, not just launch on day one.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that reminds me of a couple of different things. Oftentimes as we're talking to marketers and business owners about launching a podcast for their brand, they're like, well, we're not sure what the audience is going to be like. I'm not sure if this guest persona, if they're going to be responsive to this idea. And what I tell them is don't wait until you launch a podcast and you've spent money with us or you've spent money on your own launching your show and developing time on strategy. Just put some feelers out there. Send 50 emails and see what sort of reply rate you get to, do you want to be a guest on my new podcast? This is kind of what I'm thinking. And you'll be surprised, like you and I were talking about a little bit offline, Darcy, even if there are failures in putting out those feelers on your product or your podcast or building your email list or trying to drive traffic to a landing page, then all of those failures or wins or somewhere in between, they're data points, and better to hit day one with some data in hand and not just a lot of good guesses. It's kind of like, I think some of the best advice for entrepreneurs is don't spend a ton of money on your good idea and then go out selling. Go and sell it before you even have a product and pitch it like it's there and see what sort of response you'll get. Because, if you just test with those closest to you, you're going to get that, yeah, I think it's good. And you might not be getting, the best feedback. And the market is really what's going to determine your success. So go test it with the market as soon as you can. I couldn't agree with you more on that point. Let's talk a little bit about multi-channel. Obviously at Mailchimp, you guys have tons of information and best practices around email, kind of the state of multi-channel marketing or omni-channel marketing. What are some of the things that you guys are seeing there and some of your advice, especially for small businesses?
Sure. So, historically it was okay for you to use one or two channels. You could use social, which is still one of the most popular. You can use email, which is definitely the number one tool people use. But what we're finding is really a macro level change in how consumers are finding information. They are in a lot more places than they've ever been. You talk about podcasts. People are listening to podcasts now. You're starting to see the streaming wars where there's lots of different places where people are consuming media content, certainly the digital proliferation. So what we have been advising customers is to really break through, you have to try different channels of communication. You have to be in the places where customers are to really break through. So the good news is small businesses are hearing that. We actually found, we did a survey in the state of small business. The average number of tools customers are using today, they're using 8 tools to manage their marketing. That's more than most of them have employees. It's kind of crazy. So what we're seeing now is this emergence of a new category of these all-in-one marketing platforms where all those different channels are in one place, which is going to make it a lot simpler for customers to actually do what they know they should be doing, which is talking to people in lots of different channels. Now you can put that all in one platform, gather all the data in one place, and make it a lot more accessible for a small business to do some of the things that enterprises have been doing for quite a while.
Hey everybody, Logan with Sweetfish here. You probably already know that we think you should start a podcast if you haven't already. But what if you have and you're asking these kinds of questions? How much has our podcast impacted revenue this year? How's our sales team actually leveraging the podcast content? If you can't answer these questions, you're actually not alone. This is why Casted created the very first content marketing platform made specifically for B2B podcasting. Now you can more easily search and share your audio content while getting greater visibility into the impact of your podcast. The marketing teams at Drift, Terminus, and here at Sweetfish have started using Casted to get more value out of our podcasts, and you probably can too. You can check out the product in action at casted.us/growth. That's casted.us/growth. All right, let's get back to the show.
Yeah, absolutely. I can remember, our founder, James Carberry, mentioning, actually, before I joined the Sweetfish team, I saw a post of his on LinkedIn, and he was talking about how in his early days of starting up Sweetfish, he was SaaS happy, right? Oh, there's a tool for this. There's a tool for this. And I think you give some good advice there to look for things that either where you can combine, what tools do you have that can integrate and integrate easily, right? Integrate is a loaded word. Anything can integrate, but making sure that you have an efficient use of your time and the tools and the spend for all of those tools. Because even if you've got several tools that are fairly low cost, they add up quickly. Going off of what you just said there, Darcy, about small businesses leveraging things that were typically only available for the enterprise, let's talk a little bit about automation. You mentioned to me offline that a lot of small business owners and marketers leading lean teams, they are looking for more time, and automation is obviously not a new trend, but if you could speak to kind of the state of that, and again, some advice for folks out there listening to this.
Yeah, you're right. Automations are not new, but the sophistication of automations is growing by the day. So historically, automations were, you could do a bulk email, right? So you can say once a month, I'm going to send this newsletter and it's going to go out to all these people. What you're able to do now, especially if you have a marketing CRM in your system, is you can do personalized automations that happen as customers are engaging with you. So you can have an automation set up that as soon as somebody buys something or maybe downloads your app, instantaneously a welcome email is sent or a thank you email is sent for a first purchase. We do, you can do an automated abandoned cart. We've even got things now where you can connect your app or connect your website, and anytime a customer does a thing, you can have an automatic communication go out to them. So really your marketing now is starting to work even when you aren't, in a much more personalized way. So it's not just bulk kind of communications, but very personalized real-time communications that can be orchestrated for a small business fairly simply.
Yeah, that actually is a really great segue from automation to personalization. Darcy, let's talk a little bit there. For many years, personalization meant a first name token or a company name token. And because of big data, especially for small businesses, the entry point into leveraging more data for even more personalization beyond kind of those entry points is changing quite a bit. Can you speak to that trend as we look at 2020 and beyond here?
Yeah, it's interesting. For me, I've been in the kind of the small business world, almost 30 years now. And a lot of things in the small business marketing report sounded familiar. These are things that we've kind of been hearing. But the thing that really resonated with me as huge new news is while almost half of the survey respondents said they're not using a data-informed strategy right now, like 46% said they are likely to in the future. So this idea of how do I, as a small business, harness all this data and big data to do things, better and really become more efficient. It's breaking through out of the enterprise world where there's already teams of data sciences that are out there figuring out how to get all this data and figure out how to market better. It's becoming much more accessible to small business owners, and they're hearing it and they're feeling it, and they're starting to say, you know what, I think I can harness that too. And so when you have platforms like at Mailchimp, we're able to get all of that data together for a small business so that they can very easily see, to your point, not just demographics, but behavioral data that says, here are the kinds of things that this customer likes. I see that they buy a lot of green stuff. So when the next time you have green pants, make sure you send them a note that says, hey, we've got green pants in store. And the likelihood that they're going to buy and convert goes up dramatically. So being able to harness that big data is, it's for me really exciting to see that small businesses are starting to lean into that, because it will make a huge difference in a world where personalization is becoming a baseline requirement of marketing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a couple of thoughts there. Folks who are regular listeners of this show know that we're big fans of Gary Vee, and one of the things he talks about regularly, as you were talking about, the changes in multi-channel and omni-channel, is you can't just create content and shove it through different channels. You need to contextualize it, and that's definitely going to have an impact on the effectiveness of that marketing. I love what you guys are doing, Darcy, in taking your data that specifically for small businesses and how they can use it. It reminds me of, something Kevin Warner, one of our co-hosts over on one of our other podcasts, the B2B Sales Show, was talking about. Be careful about, the data that you see about, well, use this subject line or, use this email strategy, because, if that's data that's being collected on the effectiveness in the enterprise, it's a very different play. It's very different context in small business. So when you look at data that informs your marketing approach, whether that's which channel or down to, effectiveness of subject lines, make sure that you're looking at it from your demographic. And so I think some of the resources that you guys are talking about, if folks listening to this are in small businesses or early stage startups or bootstrap teams that are, earlier stages in their growth, look at that data based on folks that are like them. So I appreciate you sharing some insights, some advice there. Darcy, if anybody listening to this would like to stay connected with you or access some of the resources that you mentioned in today's episode, what's the best way for them to reach out or stay connected or take next steps from here?
Absolutely. So certainly I'm on Twitter. I have an unusual handle. It's Gizkur, Gizkur, but come follow me there. You'll see a lot of this stuff. It is where I do a lot of curation specifically for small businesses. So it's a great place to go. So feel free to follow me. I'm also on LinkedIn, which is a great place to find Darcy Kurtz on LinkedIn. Comes up pretty easily.
Awesome. We will also try to link to those reports in the show notes for folks that want to take a look at some of that content and some of the data that Darcy was mentioning. The other thing we'll link to in the show notes, Darcy mentioned cost-effective things you can do to try and test the market, do some early marketing. James and I did a behind the curtains episode on the Google alphabet soup approach to SEO. So you can figure out if you are going to start creating some content in the early days, how can you use that? It's something we're doing for some of our podcasts. You can definitely apply it to the content strategy for any sector or any marketing that you're going to be putting out. Darcy, this has been a great conversation. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Yes, this was awesome. Thanks so much for having me.
We totally get it. We publish a ton of content on this podcast, and it can be a lot to keep up with. That's why we've started the B2B Growth Big Three, a no-fluff email that boils down our 3 biggest takeaways from an entire week of episodes. Sign up today at sweetfishmedia.com/big3. That's sweetfishmedia.com/big3.